Welcome to the Freedom California podcast. I'm your host, Samuel Coleman, Outreach Director for the Freedom Foundation in California. Today I am joined by Mariah Gondeiro, Lead California Litigator, and William Petry, California Development Associate. Join us today as we talk about Governor Newsom's shady dealings, California's issues with COVID data, and an attack on the Freedom Foundation headquarters in Olympia, Washington. Stay tuned. All right, well, welcome back to the Freedom California podcast. I'm Sam Coleman, the Outreach Director here in California. I'm joined today by William Petry, who's a Development Associate, and Mariah Gondeiro, again, our Chief Litigation Counsel here in California. So, William, why don't we start out by telling us a little bit about what you do for the Freedom Foundation and, how you came to us.
Sure. Yeah, I came on the team last September, and what I do is I help to support our work here in California by raising funds. So I work closely with our state director, Bob Wickers, and we work together to, California is a huge state, so I'm in Southern California, and so we try to divide the state in half and try to get all the supporters and raise awareness to people who would like to support us. There's a lot of new territory here in California. So anyway, this is what I've been doing this past year.
Fantastic. So William, one of the big questions, this is the first question I ever asked of Mariah when she came on the podcast, is which is better, Coke or Pepsi?
Oh, okay. I'm a Coke person. So
That's a shame, but we still accept you. You're talking with two Pepsi people right now.
I heard that. Yeah, I remembered. I was like, oh, I'm probably going to get some heat for that.
You are. Yeah, we're going to be having a conversation about that after this podcast. You're okay for now. So what I wanted to talk about today was this blog post that we wrote about, which was Governor Newsom apparently receiving a tax-free mansion from an LLC that he claimed he was a member of, or I guess he never technically claimed he was a member of it. One of his media spokespeople kind of suggested he was a member of it, but as we found out now, thanks to a really great article originally posted by Red State, he was never a member of the LLC that gifted him the mansion. And in fact, it turns out that based on, gifting laws around political contributions, which are supposed to be limited to $500, it's likely that this mansion costs a little bit more than that. I believe the asking price at the time was somewhere in the ballpark of $3.7 million. So there were questions at the time too, because Newsom still had a mortgage on his other home. And there were questions about how somebody could afford to pay for a new mansion while also paying for their old house. And it turns out, Mariah, you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. It's this winery that he owns quite a few shares of. This person who ended up gifting it to him is connected to this winery that he has refused to close, while 80% of wineries across California are closed. So I want to open this up to both of you. William, we'll start with you. Do you think he's going to be held accountable? Do you think this is going to turn into something? I mean, it seems like a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely seems like a lot of money, way past the 500 limit. And I think it's very shady, as you talked about that winery last time. Yes, this is it's either high-level corruption or he doesn't know what he was supposed to do. But I think that this is really problematic, however you look at it, especially, when you look at, 80% of the wineries that were closed down, but, a little bit of self-interest there, where his winery never got shut down. It raises lots of questions, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Mariah, what do you think?
Well, I think I agree with William. I think it just raises a lot of questions, like why is his winery and everyone else is closed? Like, what makes his winery different? Is it more sanitary? What's his justification? Like, I would just like to know what his justification is why his gets to be open and everyone else is closed.
Well, sure. And to be fair, I think this winery, which he doesn't own outright, he owns, I think, about $600,000 worth of shares in this winery, is in a county. It's in Napa County, which is not on the state watch list for counties that are experiencing extremely high, COVID spikes. So, I mean, to be fair, maybe he just got lucky. Maybe it's just in a place where, hey, there's not as much of the disease, and so we can keep it open. But, I think the other thing to think about here is who sets the limit for what a spike in COVID is.
Yeah, that's another thing too. I mean, Governor Newsom is the one who, or they get to decide, the state gets to decide, who is on this, which areas are, need to be restricted more. And so it could be very easy for someone who has a winery in Napa to be like, oh, this area is not bad. Let's open things back up.
Right.
It seems it would be very convenient for Napa to not be on the watch list for him.
No.
Right. Well, and I think this is what annoys a lot of people and gets to me too is, Newsom loves to end these press conferences by saying something along the lines of, hey, we're all in this together. We're all suffering together. But, elected officials like Newsom, there's no fear that they're not going to get a paycheck. There's no fear that, they're going to get their houses taken away from them. They're, none of them are renting, I don't think. They probably all own their homes.
Well, he gets a free home.
Well, he gets a free home. Yeah, that's right.
Just so free mansion.
That's a good point. But the sentiment, we're all in this together, does it feel kind of empty right now? Because that's the way it feels for me.
I mean, I feel that way, but I don't. What's so sad is I just feel like the majority of my peers do feel that way. I think they're so persuaded by words, and they're not skeptical of anyone as long as they're saying the right things. They just believe them. But for me, I just find it's hard for me to take what he says at face value. I'm a lot more skeptical.
Yeah, and I think that kind of makes it more, I don't know, sinister to say we're all in this together, and people believe that, it's true. He's, thinking about the businesses and things like that, but he's not skipping a paycheck. He's not worried about a mortgage, and he's not worried about his business, but everybody else here is, so I think that makes that statement, especially that sentiment that, there's some kind of understanding, but it doesn't seem that that's the case.
Yeah, I would agree. And what makes this interesting is I think there's probably some people out there defending him saying, oh, people make mistakes. He forgot to file a form. He forgot, yada. But if you go back to when he was, I believe, running for not lieutenant governor, but when he was still in San Francisco as a supervisor, he had an issue where he had $11 million of undisclosed business and personal loans over a 4-year period that he never filed any kind of, typically if you're an elected official and you have like business dealings, you're supposed to disclose those because then it lets people know that you're being transparent and you can look out for perhaps self-dealing.
Yep.
But this happened again in like the early 2000s where he had all this money from various people that he'd gotten loaned to him or through, businesses. He didn't disclose it. And we all just seem to be okay with it. I mean, he's the governor now. So I think that says that we're all okay with it, or at least the voters were okay with it. And it just seems like it's happening again.
Yeah. Well, maybe they're not okay with it because they actually don't know anything. I mean, I think that for the most part, Governor Newsom gets a lot of very positive media coverage. So if people, I mean, I suspect that the majority of people don't even know about any of his self-dealings, which is the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, that just lack of awareness. I think if people were more aware of these personal interests or these gifted mansions, these kinds of things, I think that they'd be a little bit more
Yeah.
critical when he comes out with a new, executive order or something.
Yeah, and just to give him the benefit of the doubt, even if this wasn't as shady as it looks, I think as a public official, as a servant, I should say, I mean, you're held to a higher standard, so you should avoid even the appearance of misconduct. So I don't think we should, even, give him a pass and be like, oh, it was an accident. It's like, no, you shouldn't even, you should avoid, those types of, the appearance of a, corruption or any type of self-dealing.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And this is another thing that bugs me about this is, okay, so this came from Red State, which is an online-only, pretty conservative news site. So and I don't want to say that like they're not, real news, they're conservative news, they're news, but where are the big name news companies who are supposed to have investigative journalists who are supposed to be looking into this kind of thing? Why is it that Red State, which is, they're a big group, but they're not as big as like MSNBC, they're not as big as CNN or Fox News, and they're the ones who are uncovering this.
Yeah.
That's what gets me too, is it seems like the media is asleep at the wheel a little bit.
Well, I do think a lot of the big media, entities kind of have their own agenda, and so they're focused on right now mainly the election and pushing their agendas. And so a lot of these stories are just going to pass by. That's why I think it's so important that we do have these little, media companies that are willing to actually report,
right,
and investigate, and they don't have an agenda.
Right. No, I think that's right. But I want to move on now to another issue that we saw in California in the last week or two, which was this massive scandal, I think. I think it's a massive scandal about the way that California...
There's a scandal in California?
Who would have guessed that California is so scandalous?
I don't believe it.
But it's this data problem, which sounds boring initially. I mean, anytime somebody says there's a data problem, it's like people just eyes glaze over, go to bed. But it is a big issue because it really affects the way that we think about and, deal with the COVID pandemic. And it was 250,000 to 300,000 data points apparently got backlogged in California's reporting system because there was a server outage a week prior and it just screwed everything up. And no one figured it out for a week. So while we thought numbers were declining and we were like, I was feeling good. I'm like, oh, great, finally, numbers are going down. Maybe we can get back to normal. Wrong. Turns out there was, I think, about 5,000 or 6,000 backlogged cases of COVID, and it shot this, it shot it way up. That's a big deal, I think, because, like I said, everything that we do is supposedly based on facts and science. And if the facts and science are wrong and no one knows for a week, that's scary. Yeah. I mean, what do you guys think? Am I making too big of a deal of this? What do you guys think?
Well, I don't think you're making too big of a deal of this. I think that this is a big problem. I think, because people's lives and their livelihoods are at stake. We're making decisions that are supposed to be based on these numbers. And when, the presumption is that the data is clear and it's evidence-based kind of practices and policy making. And when you have a massive data backlog, like 300,000 tests, 250,000 to 300,000, or 5,000 cases that we weren't clear, and it was a whole week before people started catching up and determining what to do with that. I think that this is a big problem, very big problem.
I think that it's important that all of our, technology is working so we can correctly report these numbers, because for one, there's lives at stake, and we want to, prevent deaths as much as possible. But on the other side, we want to be able to correctly report it so that businesses can start to actually open up again, and we can get the economy going. And if the numbers are skewed, it just gives the governor like Newsom an excuse not to open things up. And so I think it's important during this pandemic that we have technology that's actually working. I mean, this isn't something to mess around with. We need to make sure that we're accurately reporting these numbers. And we don't have an agenda on either side. Because there's so many lives, that have been lost, but also and businesses destroyed, family businesses that have been destroyed. We need to just be acting very diligently and making sure that everything's working and we're getting the facts.
We need good data so we can make good choices. Basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, there's another sort of little side issue that came out of this, which was Dr. Sonia Engel, who is the state public health director, kind of abruptly resigned, just out of the, no, I wouldn't say out of the blue because of all this happening, but very abruptly sent in her resignation and quit. And, during this press conference that happened, I think on Monday, it was the first press conference in a week that had happened after this whole data issue, reporters were asking Newsom, was she asked to resign? Was she forced to resign? And he refused to answer any questions about her resignation, which tells me that she was just sort of the patsy. She was the fall guy. And I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if that's true, but if it is, it seems unfair to me that she would be held responsible, but Newsom's the one steering the ship. I mean, anyways. You think that's fair?
I agree with you. I don't think it's fair. And I think, and I don't know if it was that press conference or a different statement that Governor Newsom said, but he said, this is like, this problem dates back before and it's going to take time to fix. It's like a bigger issue. But Dr. Sonia Engel has only been in here for a year in that position. So I definitely don't think that the weight of the responsibility should just, fall on her. I think that it doesn't seem fair.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was a specific quote that he said during the press conference. I believe he said, "We're all accountable to the things that people under us do." And I immediately thought, well, Governor Newsom, she's below you, so aren't you accountable then? I don't see how it's all her fault, and she's taking the brunt of this thing. I mean, I think that again, this is just the media being way too nice to the governor.
Mm-hmm. And not very nice to everyone else who may not agree with the governor.
Right.
Yeah, I think it would have been nice if, Newsom could have explained why he just let her go.
Well, again, he didn't let her go. She resigned. But there's all these questions about, why did she resign so abruptly?
Well, why?
And I guess that would be the question.
Was he pushing her out, Because why would someone just abruptly resign?
Well, yeah, again, that's the question that the media is trying to, or some members of the media are trying to get to, and he's just refusing to answer, which makes me think, kind of like you said, he asked her to resign or he told her to resign.
Yeah.
To be the fall girl, I guess, not fall guy.
Yeah, that's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, I would say so. Okay, well, Mariah, William, thanks for talking with us. We'll be right back after a quick break. Stick around. If you like what we do at the Freedom Foundation and you want to see more of it, consider making a small financial donation to the Freedom Foundation. The Freedom Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit and all donations are 100% tax deductible. Visit freedomfoundation.com/donate. All right, everyone, welcome back. Mariah, William, thanks for sticking around. So the last thing we're going to talk about here today is an incident that happened at the Freedom Foundation headquarters about 2 weeks ago. And that was somebody apparently came by during the weekend and fired a gun into the window of the Freedom Foundation headquarters building in Olympia, Washington. I mean, the good news is it happened over the weekend. No one was in the building. No one was injured. But it is still kind of odd that this is something that a person would choose to do to the Freedom Foundation, because we're a national organization. Sure, we get some good press attention, but we're not like the NRA. We're not like this huge, gigantic. Obviously, as you can look around now, we're filming this podcast from our spare bedrooms and such. So, clearly we're not this huge, scary organization. So I don't really understand what this person was trying to accomplish. Is it an intimidation thing? Is it, I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it wasn't a targeted effort to intimidate us. I mean, clearly whoever this person was, they picked the weekend. They knew no one was going to be in there. But they also obviously knew that when we got back on Monday, we would see this bullet hole. Like, I don't know who would not see a bullet hole through a window.
Right.
So I think it was definitely just an effort to intimidate us.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Freedom Foundation, the headquarters is not in a location where, it's like, oh, well, this might have been an accident, some crazy thing on Saturday night or something. You go there because you know that you're going to the Freedom Foundation building. I mean, and so I think it's very clear that whoever did this is trying to intimidate the Freedom Foundation.
And also someone, another good point too, I mean, they would have had to know that was the Freedom Foundation, because like we don't have a huge sign that says Freedom Foundation, turn left. It's in a building near other, like small businesses, or it's in a little complex next to all, different businesses. So they knew that where they shot, that was where Freedom Foundation workers, work.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you guys. It was definitely targeted. I was being a little facetious, I think, earlier. I mean, it was definitely an attempt to, intimidate us. I will say this about the Freedom Foundation. It is the safest building I've ever been to. The amount of people that conceal carry. Anyways, it's an extremely safe place to work.
Yeah. Good thing it was on the weekend.
Yeah, seriously. Well, I was thinking of like, it's like attempting to rob a gun store. Like, it's just not going to go well if somebody would waltz in there on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
But this is a question I want to pose to the group. There are organizations out there that exist solely funded by unions to target and harass us. They have said things like certain staffers are racists. They've said things like certain staffers are, sexist. They've said that, we somehow through some link of donors are somehow also funded by the same people that fund white supremacists. That one I really don't get. But do you think that these groups that exist solely to harass us bear any kind of responsibility for the actions that people end up taking? Because, I mean, if you told me, hey, there's a white supremacist that lives down the street, I'm not going to care if somebody goes over there and, beats them up while they're getting their mail. Hey, they probably deserve it. So, I mean, what do you guys think? Are people responsible for the rhetoric that they spread?
Absolutely. And I think that it's just, it's extremely reckless for these groups to be just spewing these words about people that they don't really know. And also, too, it's just lazy. It's a lazy way of attacking your opponent. You see it all the time. You have to resort to ad hominem attacks. It's just lazy. It's like if you don't like what we're doing, at least engage in the merits. Provide substantive arguments as to why you do not like what we're doing, and also look at the cases we're filing. Read the facts about our plaintiffs, and try to dispute what's going on, because we're not just here. We're here to hold government unions accountable, and we're protecting public employees who are being abused by unions. I mean, the last 3 cases we filed in California have been on behalf of home care providers whose signatures have been forged on a membership card. I mean, this is criminal conduct. And so you know, I just think that it's a diversionary tactic for them. They don't want to engage in the merits, because who would want to try to, you know, justify this type of conduct? You know, like, how can you justify the union forging people's signatures? So what they're going to do is they're just going to try to attack us, and it's reckless and it's lazy.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And especially, so I mean, I've been out in the field with my canvassers. I know how the union treats our canvassers. I know how the union will attempt to intimidate or harass our canvassers. I mean, we've ran multiple blog posts about this. A former staffer, Mackenzie, who was surrounded by about 20 Teamster thugs, and they stood around insulting her and making her feel uncomfortable. We had one canvasser who, and this is while I was out there with him, a member of OCEA, which is the Orange County Employees Association, referred to him by a racial slur. I mean, the list really goes on of how the union has attempted to intimidate and harass our staffers and our canvassers. And it, like you said, it's lazy, it's reckless, they can't fight us on the points. They can't beat us on, you know, in debate. So what they're going to do is they're going to come after us in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I 100% agree with both of you. I think that individuals are accountable for the rhetoric that these different groups are spreading. And I mean, I have a little bit of background in philosophy, so I'm going to bring out Aristotle here. He talks a little bit about rhetoric, right? And he thinks, you know, there's always means and ends, right? So the rhetoric is the art of persuasion about some end, right? And so if the end is something true or good, or something is what you're persuading about, then you can do a lot of good for society. But if the end is bad, and you misuse persuasion, and so and this causes lots of harm in society. And so, of course, you know, groups that are attacking Freedom Foundation on, you know, personal attacks or just outlandish attacks, they're really misusing rhetoric for incorrect means, and they are causing a lot of great harm, I think. And so, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, last question I'm going to pose to the two of you. William, Mariah, do you feel intimidated?
No, I don't.
I also don't feel intimidated.
Yeah,
no, I don't.
I don't.
It actually, I think, just kind of fires me up more.
Yeah. I mean, it really does have an opposite effect to what they want to happen, because, like I said, the Freedom Foundation Washington building is the safest building I've ever had the pleasure to work in. I just don't feel it. I mean,
I think it's pathetic.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I would agree.
That's how I feel.
I agree.
All right, great. Well, William, Mariah, thanks for joining me this week on the Freedom California podcast. I'm Sam Coleman, again, the Outreach Director, and hopefully we'll see you again next week.